History Images of America. Military brass, senators, socialites and even babies. These are a handful of Washington, D.C. subjects photographed by Charles Milton Bell, 1848–93, during the last quarter of the 19th century. C. M. Bell was the youngest member of a family of Washington photographers. He opened his own studio on Pennsylvania Avenue in 1873, eventually becoming one of the city's leading portrait photographers. The dome of the U.S. Capitol was designed by Philadelphia architect Thomas U. Walter, who took on the project after entering a competition to design an extension of the Capitol, while the government building had an original dome added in the 1820s. 1862. Lincoln visits a Civil War camp in Maryland. The Battle of Antietam was the bloodiest single-day battle in American history, in which Union General George B. McClellan and his men successfully forced the troops of Confederate General Robert E. Lee out of Maryland and thwarted his efforts to invade the North. This photo shows then-President Abraham Lincoln visiting McClellan and his troops at their camp near Sharpsburg, Maryland, where the president attempted to persuade McClellan to attack Lee's troops while the Union Army had the upper hand. Refusing to comply, McClellan was dismissed from his ranks shortly after. In this 1906 photo, the severe damage of an earthquake in San Francisco is shown throughout the city. The earthquake spurred a devastating firestorm that claimed the lives of about 3,000 people and destroyed about 80% of San Francisco. In this 1863 picture, crowds gather around President Abraham Lincoln in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, as he prepares to deliver his famous Gettysburg Address. In the 19th century, American bison were hunted to near extinction. Entrepreneurs and hunters killed the animals for their prized skins and left their bodies behind to decay. In this picture, a poacher is seen standing on a pile of around 100,000 bison skulls. In this 1903 picture taken in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, Orville Wright is seen manning the controls on the lower wing, piloting the Wright Flyer on the first powered flight ever. In the moments before the plane was airborne, his brother, Wilbur Wright, on the ground, guided and steadied the plane as it accelerated along the starting rail at left. In March 1936, during the height of the Great Depression, photographer Dorothea Lange came across a camp of 2,500 destitute campers and snapped this photo. Known as "Migrant Mother," the photo came to define America's Great Depression era. Taken on the morning of June 6, 1944, a military vehicle called an LCVP disembarks troops of Company E, 16th Infantry, 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, onto Omaha Beach in Normandy, France. This remarkable act of heroism sought to liberate France from Hitler's grasp and end World War II in Europe. During the initial landing, 2/3 of Company E became casualties. In this 1957 picture, Elizabeth Eckford of what became known as the Little Rock Nine is seen being followed and threatened by an angry white mob on her way to class, as one of the first African American students to ever attend classes at Little Rock Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. U.S. civil rights leader Martin Luther King waves to supporters from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial moments after delivering his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech on August 28, 1963, during the March on Washington. President John F. Kennedy slumps down in the backseat of his presidential limousine in Dallas after being fatally shot by a sniper. First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy leans over the president as Secret Service agent Clint Hill pushes her back to her seat. "She's going to go flying off the back of the car," Hill thought as he tried to secure the First Lady. Lyndon B. Johnson takes the oath of office as President of the United States, shortly after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in Dallas. Jackie Kennedy stands to Johnson's left as he is sworn in. Civil rights activist James Meredith grimaces in pain as he pulls himself across Highway 51 after being shot in Hernando, Mississippi, on June 6, 1966. Meredith, who defied segregation to enroll at the University of Mississippi in 1962, completed his protest march from Memphis, Tennessee, to Jackson, Mississippi, after receiving treatment for his wounds. Ralph Abernathy, Jesse Jackson, and others stand on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel and point in the direction of gunshots that killed American civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. in Memphis. Extending gloved hands skyward in racial protest, U.S. athletes Tommie Smith and John Carlos stared downward during the playing of "The Star-Spangled Banner," after Smith received the gold and Carlos the bronze for the 200-meter run at the Summer Olympic Games in Mexico City. Robert F. Kennedy is comforted by Juan Romero, a busboy at the Ambassador Hotel, after being shot 3 times by a gunman. He died in the hospital a day later from his wounds. The killer's motive for the murder appears to have been in retaliation of Kennedy's support of Israel. Taken moments after Neil Armstrong first walked on the Moon during the Apollo 11 flight, the astronaut is seen on verge of tears by what he had just experienced. He was the first human being to ever set foot on the lunar surface. In this Pulitzer Prize-winning picture, released prisoner of war Lieutenant Colonel Robert L. Sturm is greeted by his family at Travis Air Force Base in Fairfield, California, as he returns home from the Vietnam War. In this hockey game of historic proportions, the United States national team, made up of only amateurs and collegiate players, defeated the Soviet Union national team, which had previously won 6 gold medals in 7 previous Olympic Games. February 22, 1980. Secret Service agent Timothy J. McCarthy, Washington police officer Thomas K. Delahanty, and Presidential Press Secretary James Brady lie wounded on the street after shots were fired at President Reagan on March 30, 1981. McCarthy threw himself into the line of fire after gunman John Hinckley Jr. had fired 6 shots from a crowd. The Space Shuttle Challenger explodes shortly after lifting off from Kennedy Space Center, Florida, on Tuesday, January 28, 1986. All 7 crew members died in the explosion, which was blamed on faulty O-rings in the shuttle's booster rockets. Hillary Rodham Clinton sits on the lap of her husband, then Democratic presidential candidate Bill Clinton, as she jokes with vice presidential candidate Al Gore and his wife, Tipper, during a brief rest on their bus in Durham, North Carolina. 1992. After traveling with his mother and 12 others in a small aluminum boat, Elian Gonzalez left Cuba in search of asylum in America. After his mother and 10 others drowned during the journey, he was rescued by fishermen and brought back to Florida. In this picture, armed federal agents seized Gonzalez from the home of his Miami relatives as the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear the case. He was returned to Cuba in June 2000.